So in multiplying and dividing real numbers, we have to look at the rules of the signs. So a negative times a negative becomes a positive. So in other words, if we have negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 5, and negative times a negative is going to give us a positive 15. A negative number times it doesn't matter which way around this is because it's commutative. Multiplication is commutative. So a negative times a positive is going to give us a negative. Other way around, still the same thing. So in other words, if we say 10 times negative 9, it's a positive times a negative. So we're going to get a negative answer, negative 90. And division works the same way, has the same rules. And keep in mind that division can be written as a fraction. So the same rules, negative divided by a negative is a positive. So with this example, negative 14 divided by negative 2 is going to give us a positive result. A negative divided by a positive. Going to give us a negative result. So here we have 40 divided by negative 10. It doesn't matter which way around it's written. A negative divided by a positive or a positive divided by a negative is going to give us a negative result. So these are the rules that we're looking at when we are going to be working in this section. And when we saw a double negative in the problems earlier, basically this was the idea. A negative times a negative. That was the idea. And it became a positive. So here we have negative 2 times 4 times a negative 6. And we know it's multiplication because there's bracket or parentheses holding each one of the numbers, and there's no sign in between the parentheses, so that just means that it's multiplication. Since multiplication is associative, we can we can rewrite this here. To put our negatives next to each other. So, now we can take these two negatives. Negative times a negative gives us what? Positive, right? So now it's 12 times 4. And then multiplying 12 times 4, they're both positive now, so we're going to get a positive result. Right. So it's equal to positive 48. So when you start to have more than one term that you're multiplying, more than two terms rather, you can put the negatives together like that. Negatives and the positives. So one thing we can do when we start to work with problems like this is determine the ending sign when we're looking at it. So here, if we look at these two, we have a negative times a negative, right? That becomes a positive. But then we're multiplying this positive times this negative. So what is our ending sign going to be? Right. So we can look at this now as just writing it without the signs, because we know that our ending sign is going to be negative. And since this is a fraction here, we can make each one of these a fraction by putting a 1 under it. And then the denominator is going to be what? Numerator. Becomes 3. And the sign, we have to go back and put the sign in. Well, the sign should be right in the middle there. Alright, so 3 over 8. And, we can't reduce that any further because nothing will divide into it except for 1. Negative 2.4 divided by negative 0.6. What's going to be our ending sign? It's going to be what? Positive, right? So now, if you're doing this by hand, what's going to be the outside of your division? 0.6, because that's the denominator. And again, if we think about it as a fraction, we would have it like it would look like that. So when we put it into this form, okay. And we worked on a couple of problems like this. What's the rule when we're dividing with the decimals? Okay, this one, if we move it to the end, that's only one place there, right? And we have to do the same amount of places to the inside. So whatever we do to this outside, we have to do the same amount of places to the inside. And it becomes 6 divided by 24 in that case, which is what? Alright, so 4. And we're going to have, when we do our multiplication, we're going to have a 0 remainder. So the answer, or the result, is 4. So the sign becomes what in the answer? So now that we know that, what about division of fractions? Right. So since we know that what the sign is going to be, let's work with this without the negative. So we take the 12 over 5, change it to multiplication by flipping that second term. Alright. Is there anything that we can do before we multiply? Okay. So 2 goes into itself once, and 2 goes into 12. 6 times. So now we have and that's going to give us 18 over 5. Alright, and that will be our final result. The negative, right. have negative 9/5, 5 over 9 divided by 2 over 3. First of all, the sign right, I heard someone say it will be negative. What would you do with this problem here? Okay, how? Okay. And since we know what the answer sign is going to be in the answer, let's just leave the sign out. Okay, good, good. And then what? Change to multiplication. And again, whenever we change to multiplication, we flip the second term. All right. And what do you see here? Right? 3 goes into itself once and goes into 9 3 times. All right. So our answer becomes 5 over 6. Yeah, we can't do anything else with that because we've already reduced it. So, now that's the good thing about reducing before you multiply, is that when you get to the end, you should have nothing left to reduce. And yes, we have a negative sign, right? Okay, so now we'll move on to 1.4. Any questions on this before we move on?